Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Giulia Sirelli from the Catholic University of Milan, and I'm going to present this study that I'm conducting with Giovanni Abbiati from the University of Brescia about, let's say, what happens to our students during lower secondary school, and about the effect that this experience have on subsequent steps of the school career of students, in particular on what happens during upper secondary cycle. As you can see in the title, we use this generic term of experience, but as you see in a while, we use this term to refer to the value added that we can estimate at the class level with respect to the competencies in Italian language and mathematics at the end of lower secondary school. In a nutshell, what we do is first to estimate this class level value added using data from grade 8, and second, we investigate whether this value added has long-lasting effect on proficiency and school career as they are measured in grade 13. So first of all, why do we talk about lower secondary school? Lower secondary school in Italy is the object of a long-lasting debate among scholars, educators and policymakers for various reasons. Researchers agree that the Italian educational system, when passing from primary to lower secondary school, becomes more unequal and more inefficient both across and within regions. And to date, there is no agreement on why this happens, but reasons for this can be found in a complex interplay between, let's say, the processes of selection and training of teachers, for example, families' choices, and also the very specific stage of students' growth and psychological development, that is pre-adolescence. Moreover, of course, it is worth considering that, as we all know, lower secondary school in our educational system is the last moment before tracking, and we know that the choice of upper secondary track has long-lasting implications, for example, in terms of the choice of enrolling at university. But the process leading to that choice, of course, takes place especially during lower secondary school. So, notwithstanding the importance of this crucial turning point, we still cannot quantify its impact, its distribution, and its long-term consequences. And this is basically what we try to do in this study. So, these are the research questions that guide our work. First of all, what we want to do is to estimate the effect of having had a particular lower secondary school experience on students' competencies in Italian language and mathematics at the end of lower secondary education, so in grade 8. And as you will see in a moment, we do this by estimating a class level value added net of confounders such as students' competencies in grade 5, social demographics, and other students' characteristics. Then we want to understand how this value added is distributed across schools and across territories, and in particular how it correlates with some class level characteristics dealing in particular with the composition of students' population. And this is particularly relevant because we know that educational inequalities tend to accumulate one over the others. And third, what we think is the real issue, especially in policy terms, are the long-term implication of this effect. So the last thing we do is to estimate the impact of the value added that we estimated in grade 8 on students' career and competencies as they are measured at the end of upper secondary school, so in grade 13. So, to estimate this lower secondary class level value added and its long-lasting impact, we take advantage of the longitudinal structure of INVALSI data. In particular, we analyze data from the cohort of students that took the 8th grade test in the school year 2017-2018. And thanks to the INVALSI longitudinal identifier, we can link this data to their 5th grade test and questionnaire and to the data collected in grade 13. So if we imagine that lower secondary school is, let's say, the treatment that we want, whose effect we want to estimate, we can use data from grade 5 as the pre-treatment information that we need to estimate the value added. And on the other side, we can use data from grade 13 to estimate the long-term impact of this, let's say, treatment. So, in order to estimate the class level value added at grade 8 in competencies in Italian language and mathematics, we use what we call the pre-treatment information from grade 5. Grade 5 core variables are of course competencies in Italian language and mathematics as they are measured by the INVALSI test. But it is worth noting that thanks to the INVALSI questionnaire, we can also use marks in the same disciplines that we know can be very different from the competencies measured by the test, but also socio-demographic variables and some psychological measures such as students' psychological attitudes towards school and specific disciplines, but also self-efficacy, anxiety, locus of control, and so on. Then, the long-term impact is estimated on 3 main variables measured in grade 13. The first is the presence of the students in the database of the school year 2022-2023. And we take this as an indicator of having had a regular career, because we know that the main reasons for not being in the database are grade repetition, having abandoned school, or having opted for 3 years professional training that does not allow you then to go to university. Second, we have upper secondary track, in particular upper secondary track of diploma. And finally, we have competencies in Italian language and mathematics of grade 13. So let's see which is our estimation strategy. As a first step, as I said before, we want to estimate the lower secondary class level value added. And as you can see in this slide, basically we follow the literature on teacher value added. So value added is estimated by including a fixed effect component in the estimation of students' competencies in grade 8 in Italian language and in mathematics. The main difference between our study and those conducted, for example, in the United States, is that we cannot disentangle teacher from class effect, and these for 2 main reasons. First, in countries such as the US, students took a test almost every year, and they can identify teachers across years and classes. And so these 2 elements taken together allow to separate the teacher level from idiosyncratic elements of the specific class. And this is something that at this stage we are not able to do with this kind of data. And so our value added is simply calculated as the class fixed effect, which is separately estimated, as I said before, for language and mathematics. So coming to the equation, what we do is basically to estimate the cumulative term that you see in the red box, that according to our definition represents the global experience of students while they go through lower secondary education. And we would like to stress that this limitation is really important if you want to isolate specifically the teacher component, but from the point of view of the students, it can be not so relevant, because this is basically their only chance of experiencing lower secondary education, because they only live one life in one class. So once estimated the class level value added in grade 8, our second step is to assess its long-term effect in grade 13, and we do this by means of matching method, but I will return on it in a few slides. So here you can see how we selected our analytical sample. I will go very quick on this because time is running out, but basically you can see that we have a very big sample of more than 300,000 students, both for mathematics and Italian language. And these are our first results. This is the distribution of class level value added estimates for the 2 disciplines, so for Italian language and mathematics in grade 8. On the x-axis we have classes that are ranked according to their estimation of value added. And the graph shows point estimates with the corresponding confidence intervals. I would like to stress mainly 2 results that we can see from these graphs. First, we have to keep in mind that we are estimating this value added with a low number of students per class. Let's say that we have an average of 15 to 20 students per class. However, we can see that we have about half of the classes for which we can say that the value added is significantly lower or higher than 0, that by construction is the average. This means that the answer to our first question, that was, is it possible to estimate value added in the Italian context, is yes. Indeed, we can distinguish between students that had a good experience in lower secondary education from those who had a bad one. And the second thing that I would like to stress is that the range of these estimates is very wide. If we exclude outliers, we remain with a difference of about 40 points that in the INVALSI scale correspond to a one standard deviation between worst, let's say, and best classes. Here we have the average class level value added for the two disciplines at the province level, and we can see that there are some internal differences and some differences among the two disciplines, but basically the big result here is the well-known divide between the center north and the south of Italy. And given this big divide, we try to understand if there is a pattern behind this, and so we try to estimate the impact of some class measure on the class level value added, which becomes here our dependent variable, and we did it separately for the two disciplines. And what you observe is that the only factor that seems to account for the differences that we see is the average socioeconomic status of students. So let's go quickly to our last research question, that is, does lower secondary experience affect last over time? And what we did here is that we matched students that have very similar characteristics in terms of socio-demographic and competencies in grade 5, but differ with regard to the lower secondary experience, meaning that they populate the first or the fourth quartile of the distribution of the value added. And we performed three comparisons, the first between students in the first and fourth quartile for mathematics, the second for Italian language, and the third distinguishing between students that populate the first quartile for both disciplines and students that populate the fourth quartile for both disciplines, and estimate their differences in these outcomes in grade 13. In this graph shows these three sets of estimates on the effects of lower secondary class level value added on outcomes concerning students' career in the upper secondary cycle. The first outcome is the presence in grade 13, so let's say student regularity. Conditional on that, we have the second and third outcomes that are taking a diploma in any academic track or in a traditional academic track, so in the liceo classico, liceo scientifico, or liceo linguistico, and the point estimates represent the difference in the probabilities associated to these outcomes that we obtain when comparing the two groups, those who had a bad experience in lower secondary education and those who had instead a good experience. And basically what we see is that having had a lower secondary experience that is evaluated above the average results in a significantly higher probability of being a regular student in upper secondary track, but also in a significantly higher probability of taking a diploma in an academic track. And in this graph instead we see the same three sets of outcomes, but in this case the outcomes are competencies in Italian language and mathematics in grade 13. On the y-axis we have differences in competencies measured in standard deviations, and again we can see that having a good experience versus a bad one has a long-lasting effect on students' performance. So summing up, what we have assessed so far is that lower secondary experience, that is that we measure as the class level value added, is statistically and substantially significant. It is unequally distributed across schools and territories, and is predictive of what happens to students in the long run. This study comes, of course, with some limitations. First of all, as I said before, we are not able at this stage to distinguish between teacher and classroom effect, and second, a great limitation is that we can only use data from two subjects and the relative competencies, which of course are a subset of the outcomes that we might be interested in. And finally, the last slide, as this is a work in progress, here is a number of additional analyses that we are planning or just starting to do. First of all, we would like to repeat the analysis on other cohorts of students that also have data from grade 10 that this cohort did not have because of the pandemic. Second, we would like to assess whether there are differentials in the long-lasting effects according to students' characteristics. That is to say, we would like to analyze whether lower secondary experience plays a more relevant role for some students than others. And finally, we are still working on the possibility of disentangling teacher effects from our value-added estimates, and if successful, we will try to predict specific teacher value-added by using the INVALSI teacher questionnaire. Thank you for your attention.